know it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Welcome to Undead Live, reporting from the front lines of the zombie apocalypse. We have your back morning, noon, and night, whether you're dead, undead, recently deceased, or fully alive. We have the apocalypse covered. I'm Erica O'Neill. Joining me today is Dave Lundberg-Kenrick.
Hello.
And crew, hello.
Yeah, I'm here. Literally, I'm at the front lines of the education dezombification apocalypse. We're here in the classroom.
That's fantastic. Welcome, everyone, to a special episode of Undead Live. We're talking today about whether education is turning students into zombies and whether we are facing that educational apocalypse that Dave just mentioned. And we're not just discussing it. We're also asking, how do we stop it? So, Dave, you and your students, have you been zombified by education?
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yes. Is that good?
Sometimes.
All right. Pros and cons. We'll be talking about those pros and cons, I think. So, Erica, have you been zombified by education?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think that you can get to the level of Dr. Erica without having been zombified in a great different many ways. And now I'm trying to break that cycle of zombification with a lot of the students that I engage with. And we have some other folks who will also come on to chat about that as well.
That's right, including our guest today who focuses on this sort of cycle of PhD zombification, Nicole Barbaro. Should we say hello to her?
Yes. So our special guest today is Nicole Barbaro. Nicole is Director of Communications and Heterodox Academy, a nonprofit professional working to improve higher education. Nicole, it's so nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, big question, 2 minutes. Are we facing an educational apocalypse? Go.
I think so in several ways. I mean, Dave, you mentioned the zombification of PhD careers, which is an area that I focus on. We can do more than just be faculty, but also from a broader student perspective. We know tuition's too high. We're focusing exclusively on job training instead of an area I'm really passionate about is fostering curiosity and open inquiry among students. And we have a big emphasis, which I know we'll talk about a little bit today too, on standardization, a big emphasis on selectivity in higher ed. So these are a lot of areas that I'm really passionate about discussing. I think there's a lot of room for discussion in these areas. So I'm excited to see what questions and topics the students have to talk about today.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your brain with us.
Of course.
We're trying to do some stuff around dezombifying education. One way is with Dave in the class right now. Dave, do you want to introduce real quick what this class is?
Is the Science of Zombification class, and we've been talking about all the things that zombify us, right? Like, what are some of the examples of things that we've talked about? Caffeine, right? Caffeine zombifying us, and
say like homework is something that definitely zombifies us.
Yeah, and then also
just relationships, maybe school.
That's school, social norms. So we've talked about class times. So many things that zombify us within education, but also other forms of zombification, such as how we're zombified by the bacteria in our brains. Although I don't know as humans are, but but today we're here to talk about how we're zombified by education, and we have Drake here. And so Drake, what do you think?
Well, I would say that one of the major things that can zombify us, even from like a younger age, like middle school or elementary school, is the different kinds of teachers we have. We have really good teachers that motivate us to be better, to pursue our own goals and get us actually interested in stuff. But then we also have other teachers that might not actually put that much effort into motivating the students and rather just treating it as a job. And I think that can kind of zombify us in a negative way and make us feel more negative about education as an overall. Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think can be done?
Well, I think what can be done is you kind of just have to rely on better teachers, right? That outweigh the negative ones, because ones that can make us feel more human, make us feel like we're our own people. Because by the time we are in school, the only other person that we've had that's a grown up in our lives is our parents, and they've been there in your negative times as well as your good times because they got to discipline you. That's kind of what parents do. So having teachers that actually treat you like a human, I think that's a way to de-zombify you. And they also help you pursue your own goals, and they're like, okay, that's your decision. How do we get there? And they make you think more deeply about what you're trying to do. And I think that is a great way to de-zombify people in education.
So Erica and Nicole, what do you guys think? What are ways that we can maximize the great teachers?
Yeah, I'm gonna hand it off to Nicole since you're the person that does studying on it, and then I'll have some anecdotal evidence to add a little flavor.
Yeah, I love this question, and this is something that I think about a lot and write about a lot. And I think a big problem, this comes into PhD training directly, is that most institutions, or actually how research institutions are defined, is that they're granting doctoral degrees. And the main focus of getting a PhD is on your research. So all of our faculty that have PhDs are coming from research institutions where their training is focused specifically on research. I can speak to my own teaching training. I had one semester of training where I took a class and they told you how to teach, and then you get thrown into the classroom, and it's pretty much trial and error for a lot of faculty members. So unless you really go out of your way to utilize the teaching and learning center on campus, really focus on teaching as a craft and as a practice, most faculty are coming out of programs that overemphasize research only. And most of our faculty are coming from a very specific portion of universities in our country, which are the top ranking selective research university. So I think students have a great point, and their points are really valid when they say, teachers, we want teachers that are more engaging and that can understand us and understand how to use good teaching strategies to help us learn, rather than only, say, lecturing, which is a very popular topic. So I think a lot of this comes down to our PhD programs, how we're training teachers, and specifically faculty in higher ed institutions. So I absolutely agree. We need better teaching, and we need better teaching training for faculty that we're hiring as well. So those are my big soapbox that I love to stand on when it comes to higher ed teaching.
Yeah, I will say that I am in one of those institutions that you mentioned, and I also teach a research course for undergraduate students. And one of the ways that we are trying to not just professionalize students to a discipline, because that's one of the things that you have, like we have them write an abstract and kind of go through an annotated bibliography and present in a mock conference. All of those are very academic things. But we're also really engaged with making sure that the research that they're doing is as community and experiential as it can be, so that they're taking everything that kind of feeds into where they are at this point in time and learning how to apply it. So it's more of an applied research than it is something that's really high level theoretical. And we've got some other classes in the Lincoln Center where we're also trying to play with that model so that we can get students really seeing how what they're doing in classrooms impacts their own life and kind of practicing some of that. So we're trying here. Just one center though.
Yeah. And a lot of those centers are voluntary, so it's not required that faculty participate. And, so you have a selection of faculty that want to be better that participate in these institutions. So it's hard to have kind of like an institutionalized training of faculty. But I love the work they're doing in those areas.
Drake, what do you think about that? Any of our recommendations ring true?
Yeah, I think that getting more training on it is an important factor. I think that it's also kind of, I don't know, it's an overall issue with education, right? It's so severely underfunded that it's almost difficult to motivate people that do have PhDs to, want to educate like lower levels, elementary school and middle school and that such.
That's a good point, right? Because we're talking about sort of college level, but a lot of people, right, our education starts a lot sooner.
Because not everybody goes to college.
Yeah.
And that's because school is rough for them. It could be because of teachers or other experiences. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean that, the students are perfect in any means. I mean, far from it. There's definitely issues with student behavior that can definitely affect teacher performance. But that's my thoughts. I think that it's definitely for higher education. Yeah, I like all those recommendations. Pretty good.
Excellent. So one question for you guys, Nicole and Erica, before we bring on Sean, who's going to talk about standardization. What do you guys think in terms of the K through 12? Any ideas on how to de-zombify that?
I would just say that the amount of funding demonstrates the value that you place on the people who are in that room doing the work with those students. And so when you underpay, you have long hours and you're not compensating adequately, that's showing them that you don't prioritize what they're bringing into those spaces in the way that it should be, since they are interacting with those students so much. Yeah. Nicole?
+1 to everything you just said. And then also, I know, Drake, you mentioned that not everyone goes to college, and I think we forget about that at the K-12 level too often. And we have basically started structuring our entire K-12 systems to help students do well on a standardized test, which I know we'll probably talk about next. So our entire K-12 system is really focused on having students do good on these standardized tests so that they can go to college. When I think that may not be the right goal to kind of frame our K-12 education around.
Well, what do you think about bringing on Sean Pendergrass to talk about that?
I'll circle around.
Who has spent his entire life with standardized testing up to this point. How you got where you are today. What are your thoughts on it, Sean?
Honestly, like at this point, like I'm currently taking like advanced level STEM courses, and the percentage of your grade that's based on exams is like getting really high. For example, 60s, 70s, occasional 80s. It is very stressful, even if you actually understand material, because it's weighted a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is kind of one point that I think about a lot, is that in college especially, there's so much pressure on students to get particular grades, especially if then you want to go into specific programs or on into graduate school. So our entire learning experience from the student perspective is focused on getting the right answer instead of really fostering this kind of curiosity and inquiry, and this really focusing on learning for learning's sake, because everything is so focused on just getting the right answer, a certain score, so you can get into a certain program. And I think that undermines the joy of the learning process that I feel like ideally I would love our higher education institutions to focus on, but comes with a lot of other changes that we would have to make to, make that, incentivize that as a goal.
So much of higher ed is kind of shifted into these pre-professional programs where you're trying to become an engineer or a pre-med, or you're going into law. And so you're pursuing a really strict course line of activities. Like there's not a lot of room for creative exploration. And that's one of the joys of a liberal arts education, is being able to do some of that and foster that creative thinking outside of a standardized test.
Yes.
So how do we do that?
I would say, like, obviously like lower the, like how much exams weigh your grade, and, change it with something like more like special projects, like essays, those kind of things, where your grade is not basically determined by how well do you feel on 3 or 4 days out of an entire semester.
Yeah, I love the idea that you brought in of special projects. In a class I taught last year, it was like a seminar upper level course on child development. And instead of doing a typical exam, I had like a general project. We kind of co-created the syllabus, co-created the requirements and the topics we could focus on. And then I let them just do, whatever they wanted to demonstrate to me that they understand one of these core topics that we discussed in class. I got short stories, I got animated books, I got full websites, multiple blogs. Like I got so much creativity out of the students, and everyone had such a wonderful time. And ultimately, I think they learned more than if I'd given them, a really standardized type test. So it's a lot of work on the teacher's end. And again, this kind of ties into a lot of different things on like the faculty end of the university, but giving students that freedom, you can really see how creative and curious they are about topics when you just give them a little bit of space outside of these standardized exams and everything that we're used to. So I think it's really fulfilling for me as an educator as well to do something like that.
Yun Long just brought up a great comment about students learning from other students. And I feel like that's a model that is also like, it helps to engage. If you can teach this to someone else, then you really know what you're talking about.
Yes. 100%.
So if you can do that sort of translational work where you're taking it from a strict essay that's in a college style, and you're making it something that's a children's book or a choose your own adventure type novel or something that's outside of that norm, then you're doing that public science communication, which really like adds value by inviting people into what it is that you're trying to learn and teach. But it's also like demonstrating your capacity to do that, because it's really hard to do if you don't know what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we underutilize the student to student learning in our classrooms. I think, the COVID and moving online has made that a little bit more difficult to have students engage with each other. But I think now that most students are back on campus, at least in some capacity, I think we should really be prioritizing that interaction between students.
Yeah. Standardized testing in K through 12 is also something that it goes from being something that doesn't really determine your grade to when you get into college, it's something that is nothing but a determination of your grade. So it's a huge switch too, between the way that you're kind of trained to think about these standardized tests and then the way testing is modeled once you get into college.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Sean, do you have any response for us?
There was like a rise of online exams, and personally, I feel an anxiety where things are not in my control anymore. If like a pencil and paper, as long as I have those two things, I can take a test. Where if something goes wrong technology-wise, I'm kind of screwed.
That does add another level of stress, right? And it adds another level of inaccessibility, right? You've got to have working Wi-Fi. You've got to have like a working computer, and not everybody is going to have access to that all the time. So yeah, that's a good point. So
yeah.
Speaking of moving things out of the classroom and students teaching other students, shall we bring on our next guest? Sean, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. We've got Vicki Takei coming up here to talk about kind of learning outside of the classroom and making things more applied.
Hi,
Hi, Vicki.
Hi. My topic, I kind of was going to apply it more on the K through 12 level, because I was going to talk about just how different approaches to materials can really impact how students take the course material, and how field trips, like for me growing up, it really just made me realize that there was more outside of my own bubble, and I could really apply it to real world experiences. And like in middle school, I had a really, really an easy relationship with science, but until I was like kind of opened up to those like science museums and those interactive, I don't know, like activities that they had, it really made me realize that like science is everywhere, and it made me see things differently, kind of just question more, kind of more critical thinking. And I think it would be helpful right now in like a college level, just kind of applying it now that we're kind of grown-ups and we have to see everything more in a grown-up structure in a different lens. And it's a different approach would lead us to more different cognitive thinking. It's proven that since we were younger, since we were like 7, 12, 14.
Yeah, I love that applied active learning. Nicole, what does your research say about that?
Big fan of active learning. I think skills that we can think about in terms of the experiential learning, which is kind of the higher ed term for a little bit about what Vicki is describing here. So we can think about it, in levels first in the classroom itself with those active learning. So instead of just having a lecture where you are passively, furiously taking notes in class, you are actually engaging with the work, trying to think critically about the content that you're learning, working with other students. So I think we can work to make those individual classes more engaging. I think at the department level, we could maybe put together some more of these like field trips. Why do field trips have to stop once you get into college? I think we should still be able to go to science museums and all these fun different kind of field outposts of learning in our communities. And that's what makes colleges so great, is that they're typically centered on community. So there's a lot of opportunities for students to get off of campus, or maybe just to new spots on campus. And then we can think about it also at a broader level of just these higher kind of experiential learning areas, especially when it comes to careers, because I think students struggle a lot with what jobs actually look like when they leave college. I recall in my department, I'm a psychologist by training, and it was just like a list of like these very stereotypical jobs that I actually don't know one psychologist that has any of these jobs that are listed on these little job pamphlets. But I think having better experience like throughout your program of actually trying to understand how you can apply what you're learning and the topics that you're learning in very diverse careers and different sectors outside of the university would be really helpful for students. So this idea of active learning and experiences, I think we can apply at various levels throughout the educational experience for students.
Yeah. So it really, a lot of that gets, I think, pushed off to internships or field work when you get to the level of higher education. we're trying to do something around the curricula that we're rolling out in the Lincoln Center right now, where we're having students interact with community. So listening to them, talking with them, trying to see what the problems are, generating solutions. That gives you not only like an understanding of how these things impact the world around you, but it gives you connections out in the real world, because not everyone is going to go straight to grad school. Like the majority of folks who we are training in these programs don't head on to higher education past getting their undergraduate degree. And so making those connections in the real world, I think, does a lot more than just helping facilitate different types and styles of learners, like Vicki was referring to. I think it's something that really sets you up for greater success.
So I'm going to switch spaces. Vicki, you stay here. You stay.
Okay.
I'm going to have Crystal come take my seat because her topic is very connected with this. So why don't you guys discuss taking
Wonderful.
learning out of the classroom?
Crystal Jensen, welcome.
Oh.
What are you discussing today?
So my topic is talking about just one of the issues with the education system that definitely zombifies me is the routine every day. And so I'm propositioning that we take learning outdoors, whether that's just like you have the lecture outside or you just incorporate nature somehow. I think that would really make the learning special, and people remember, oh yeah, we learned about the like electron when we were outside, you know? And I think that would definitely, it's more cost effective too for the schools that can't afford field trips. So I think it's a nice neutral way to make learning more exciting, but also cost effective, and anyone can just go outside for a lecture, you know?
Yeah, so much of K through 12 is training students to sit in a chair all day and be still. Nicole, what are your thoughts on that?
I love this idea for all the reasons that you brought up of just, making new connections and just having, nicer environments for learning. But I love it for the additional benefit where it really will kind of jumpstart faculty to think creatively about how they can teach in their rooms or in these outdoor spaces without PowerPoint slides, because we know that PowerPoint slides are the favorite of faculty. I actually stopped using them the last few years myself as I've been teaching, trying to, kind of create new ways for me to teach and focus more on discussion and student interaction. So I love the idea that kind of taking out of that very contrived space that we're used to, where we look at a PowerPoint slide, we sit in rows and we take notes. So I like it for the benefits for the student learning experience, but also the benefits for faculty to think creatively and differently about how to teach and engage with their students if we do kind of these outdoor teaching spaces rather than inside the classroom. So I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I taught a lot of biology labs where we bring people out there, because how are you you can look at an ecosystem in a textbook, but it's so much better to go out into your community or even just around campus and say, what are all the adaptive properties of these things that are around us right now? Like trying to keep that so it's something that's top of mind with your learning objectives, but you actually get to get out there and engage all of your senses in that process. I love that idea.
And as a psychologist, a campus is a great space for people watching and observing. So we can practice the methods of observational research on campus with students. So I think it's a great engagement to go outside. So fabulous idea.
Yeah. Vicki, Crystal, have you had any kind of experiences with this that have resonated, or is this aspirational for you? Do you have any classes that have done this sort of thing before?
Not like intentionally having like a lecture outside, but I know in my course for research methods, we have to be outside and apply our like the concepts that we're learning about. And currently we're actually studying about the correlation that tree coverage on campus has with academic success and performance. So I have experienced it, and I do see it in like my everyday school to school life. And it does help. It helps you kind of personalize the kind of environment that you're in, and it really just again makes you see things differently, and it makes you start thinking, start asking questions, and it makes you more of an observational learner, just like you said.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Me personally have never experienced that, but I remember my mom telling me about times where her elementary school would take the class outside, and the fact that she's old and still remembers this, I think is really impactful, because she would talk about how they would have different stations outside, and so the teachers could choose which station they wanted to teach that day. So there would be like the English station or the math station or the science station, and you would like rotate outside, and they had like a nature walk where they could see different types of animals. And I think if we could incorporate that somehow into even higher education, I think the fact that she remembers it then, oh, my mom is commenting, she's not old, but opinion. And I think it is just a good idea overall, because if you remember what you learned when you were in elementary school, you'll definitely remember it when you're in college or high school.
I love that. And just like Vicki had mentioned, a lot of research-based courses do this sort of work. But the more that we can bring in folks who are doing not the fieldwork aspect of it or that research-based aspect, but just general education, there's no reason why you can't hold that outside, aside from the fact that you can't have your PowerPoint slides at the ready, just like Nicole had mentioned.
Yeah. I think it forces more discussion and interaction. So I think that would be a wonderful idea for us to, do more outside. And I think this is a great opportunity for institutions and leaders of institutions to figure out how can we make our outdoor campus spaces more conducive to courses. Like, are there, just kind of like landscaping options we can do to make it, more comfortable, kind of have some benches or something set up, just having those spaces where it seems clear and obvious for faculty to maybe propose, hey, let's go outside today and let's, go to this specific space. So I think there's an opportunity for other people in the campus community to also get involved and make that more incentivized for faculty and students to learn outside, get outside the classrooms.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Vicki and Crystal. It's great to have your perspective.
I'm going to have them stay up here and bring all the students out of the
Yes, your horror movie lighting is really foreboding in this class. I'm into it. And also, this class, I think, is a great example of how we're trying to do some of that applied learning and get you out of the regular way of thinking about what you're learning and trying to put it into action by giving you an opportunity to practice public speaking and see how the things that you're learning are in a more applied setting. So thank you all so much for being here with us today. It was wonderful to hear from you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So do you guys have any final thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I had a few. I think that all of this is pretty good. It reminds me a little bit more of, instead of having like the maybe separated class schedules that are so prevalent nowadays, I went to a Montessori school. So basically I had one teacher throughout the entire day who taught me all of my subjects for most of elementary school. And I saw a comment earlier that was posted by a chatter who basically was like, it's a coordination issue because of such the short time period for classes. I think that could be something that helps improve that, because now not only do you have one teacher that you see every day, but also one teacher that is able to grow and adapt to their students, rather than having 7 or 8 teachers having to all adapt to a single student, is able to actually care for them, take a field trip with the entire class because they have the whole day to them, and basically make learning more enjoyable. It was something I was thinking about while everybody was speaking earlier.
What grade level were you supposing this would happen?
What was it?
What grade level were you supposed this would happen?
I mean, that happened in elementary school, and I know that school went all the way up to 8th grade for it. I'm not sure how effective it would be in high school, but I mean, I haven't seen a high school that have tried it. So.
Fair point.
But because it's just getting a little deeper than what most people can do now.
That's fair.
For like all the subjects.
Like that, just that willingness to explore and to try new sort of modalities. Montessori is one of them that's had success in that. And I wish that there were more that we could point to as being like, here are some really high performing examples of folks that have also stepped outside of the norm. Maybe Nicole, you and your research group will be one to take that on, that challenge.
Yeah, I would love to explore new ways that we can structure higher ed from the way that we've been doing it for the last 200 years, I would say, in the US. So I think it is ripe to try some new approaches and different models for how we can teach students. So love those ideas.
And thank you, students, for helping us to think over these problems, because your input is essential to that process.
Absolutely.
And Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful to hear you today and hear about what your research is and how it applies to these sort of learning environments and different ways of thinking.
I appreciate that. It was great speaking with everyone, and thanks for having me on.
So before we go, I wanted to let everybody know that Zombie History will be the next time that we're going to meet all together on this channel, same time, same space, Monday on 2/27 after the spring break here. And we have Mzilikaze Kone and Liz Grumbach, who will chat with a special guest about how reparative justice and art are dezombification techniques. So make sure to subscribe and hit that like button before you leave, and we'll help you stay up to date on the apocalypse. Thanks for joining us for this discussion, Dezombifying Education. See you next time here on Undead Live, where we have the apocalypse covered.
And if the whole world says that we're cool, we